Good morning, everyone. My name is Jessica Alrihino from Bikaid 3, and I am here to report the assigned topic, which is all about the outcome-based education for teacher preparation curriculum. But before that, let us have an overview about the outcome-based education. So, outcome-based education or OBE became the fundamental philosophy of higher education in the Philippines lately. All curricula, including that of teacher education, will be anchored on the concept of OBE in terms of course designing, instructional planning, teaching, and assessing students' learning. And this module will explain the significant reform in teacher education in the Philippines. So now let us have the desired learning outcomes. So the first is define what is outcome-based education as this apply to teacher education. The second is analyze the four principles in outcome-based education. The third is describe how teaching and learning relate to OBE. The fourth is explain how the achieved learning outcomes will be assessed. And the last is summarize the prospective teacher's role and responsibilities in the implementation of the outcome-based education. In takeoff, there are questions that we need to answer. Why do we hear a lot of educators talking about OBE? What is outcomes-based education about? Should curriculum for teacher preparation be influenced by this? Why? And how will OBE address the 21st century teachers? The answer is a lot of educators talking about OBE because when we say outcome-based education, it means focusing and organizing a school's entire programs and instructional efforts around the clearly defined outcomes we want all students to demonstrate when they leave school. School curriculum for teacher preparation influenced by this because learning OBE is enhancing every teacher and students to think critically and perform due to their capacity. OBE enhances curriculum. It serves as the guide to every teacher. It is an education that is anchored and focused on outcomes. The OBE addressed the 21st century in a way that the teachers should facilitate the teaching and learning in such way the learners can demonstrate competencies and understanding of what they have learned. In addition, teachers need skills to construct and manage classroom activities efficiently, use technology to enhance the teaching and learning process. So now let us proceed to the outcomes-based education. So what is outcome-based education? According to W. Spady, outcomes-based education defined as a clearly focusing, organizing everything in the educational system around the essential for all the students to do successfully at the end of the learning experiences. It is also a clear picture of what is important of the students to be able to do then organizing the curriculum, instruction, and assessment to make sure that learning happens. This definition clearly points to the desired results of education, which are the learning outcomes. These are made up of knowledge, understanding, skills, and attitudes that students should acquire to make them reach their full potential and lead fulfilling lives as individuals in the community and at work. Spady premised that in outcomes-based educations, all students can learn and succeed, but not at the same time or in the same way. Second, successful learning promotes even more successful learning, and schools and teachers control the conditions that will determine if the students are successful in school learning. There are four essential principles in OBE. In order to comply with the three premises, four essential principles should be followed in either planning instruction, teaching, and assessing learning. So, the first principle is the clarity of focus. A clear focus on what teachers want students to learn is the primary principle in OBE. So, it means that the teachers should bear in mind that the outcome of teaching is learning. To achieve this, teachers and students should have a clear picture in mind of what knowledge, skills, values must be achieved at the end of the teaching and learning process. This is like looking straight ahead so that target will be reached. The second principle is what we call the designing backwards. This principle is related to the first principle. At the beginning of a curriculum design, the learning outcome has to be clearly defined. What to achieve at the end of the formal schooling is determined as the beginning. Decisions are always traced back to desired results. This means that planning, implementing, or teaching and assessing should be connected to the outcomes. The third principle is what we call the high expectations. Establishing high expectations, challenging standards of performance will encourage students to learn better. This is linked to the premise that successful learning promotes more successful learning as mentioned by Spady in 1994. This is parallel to Thorndike's law of effect, which says that success reinforces learning, motivates, builds confidence, and encourages learners to do better. The last principle is what we call expanded opportunities. In OBE, all students are expected to excel, hence equal expanded opportunities should be provided. As advocates of multiple intelligences say, every child has a genius in him or herself, hence is capable of doing the best. Learners develop inborn potentials if corresponding opportunities and support are given to nurture. Teaching and learning in OBE. So, teaching is teaching if learners learn. Learning is measured by its outcome. Whatever approach to teaching is used, the intent should focus on learning rather than on teaching. Subjects do not exist in isolation, but links between them should be made. And it is important that students learn how to learn. Hence, a teacher should be innovative. And now, here are some tips in teaching learning in OBE. Number 1, teachers must prepare students adequately. So, this can be done if the teachers know what they want students to learn and what learning outcomes to achieve. Prerequisite knowledge is important. Thus, a review is necessary at the start of a lesson. Number 2, teachers must create a positive learning environment. Students should feel that regardless of individual uniqueness, the teacher is always there to help. Teacher and student relationship is very important. The classroom atmosphere should provide respect for diverse kind of learners. Number 3, teachers must help their students to understand what they have to learn, why they should learn it, what use it will be now and in the future, and how will they know what they have learned. Number 4, teachers must use a variety of teaching methods. The most appropriate strategy should be used taking into account the learning outcome teachers want the students to achieve. Also, to consider are the contents, the characteristics of the students, the resources available, and the teaching skill of the teacher. Even if OBE as learner-centered, sometimes more direct, time-tested, methods of teaching will be appropriate. Number 5, teachers must provide students with enough opportunities to use the new knowledge and skills that they gain. So when students do this, they can explore with new learning, correct errors, and adjust their thinking. Application of learning is encouraged rather than mere accumulation of this. And the last is teacher must help students to bring each learning to a personal closure that will make them aware of what they have learned. Here are additional key points in teaching and learning in OBE which show the shifts from a traditional to an OBE view. So from traditional view, there is instruction, inputs and resources, knowledge is transferred by the teacher, teacher dispenses knowledge, and teachers and students are independent and in isolation. While to OBE view, there is a learning outcomes, knowledge already exists in the minds of the learners, teachers are designers of methods, and teacher and students work in teams. Assessment of learning outcomes in OBE. Assessment in OBE should also be guided by the four principles of OBE, which are clarity of focus, designing backwards, high expectations, and expanded opportunity. It should contribute to the objective of improving students' learning, since in OBE, there is a need first to establish a clear vision of what the students are expected to learn or the desired learning outcome. Then, assessment becomes an embedded part of the system. Useful in OBE system, assessment should be guided by the following principles. Number 1, assessment procedure should be valid. Procedure and tools should actually assess what one intends to test. Number 2, assessment procedure should be reliable. The results should be consistent. Number 3, assessment procedure should be fair. Cultural background and other factors should not influence assessment procedure. Number 4, assessment should reflect the knowledge and skills that are important to the students. Number 5, assessment should tell both the teachers and students how students are progressing. Number 6, assessment procedures support every student's opportunity to learn things that are important. Number 7, assessment procedure should allow individuality or uniqueness to be demonstrated. And number 8, assessment should be comprehensive to cover a wide range of learning outcomes. Learners' responsibility for learning. In OBE, students are responsible for their own learning and progress. Students have the bigger responsibility to achieve outcomes. Students will be able to know whether they are learning or not. And one of the great benefits of OBE is that it makes students aware of what they should be learning and what they should do when they are actually learning and what they should do when they are learning. All of this will conclude with the achieved learning outcome. In terms of students' perspectives, there are common questions that will guide them as they learn under the OBE curriculum framework. To guide the students in OBE learning, they should ask themselves the following questions. Number 1, what do I have to learn? Number 2, why do I have to learn it? Number 3, what will I be doing while I am learning? Number 4, how will I know that I am learning what I should be learning? Number 5, will I have any say in what I learn? And number 6, how will I be assessed?
Take action. Finding OBE in the classroom. Number 1, seek permission from the teacher to observe the class for one complete teaching lesson. Number 2, borrow the teacher's lesson plan. Identify the intended learning outcomes or objectives at the beginning of the lesson. Number 3, observe the classroom activities with the guidance of the teacher. Number 4, observe if the intended learning outcome in the beginning was achieved in the end of the lesson. And number 5, summarize all recorded observations.
In my take action, I have not supposed to make an observation in the classroom. Instead, I conduct an interview. The teacher name is Sir Matt Jaqueca. He is one of the teacher in Tagum National High School. he teaches students from grade 9 and grade 10 in science and English subject. The answer in my take action is the intended learning outcomes of the lesson is investigate the relationship between the angle of release and the height and range of the projectile. The activities to accomplish the intended learning outcome is students will solve the problem, and the problem is a boy throw a ball off the edge of a 15-meter tall cliff. I threw it horizontally at 8.0 meter per second. In achieve learning outcome at the end of the lesson, it determines how much time takes to fall, how far from the base of the cliff it hits the ground. It also determines how fast it is moving vertically when it hits the ground. My report is in the intended learning outcome, which he opposed such activity wherein students will apply what they learn from the lesson. And also, his intended learning outcome was achieved. In subject, based on the activity 1, finding OBE in the classroom, answer the questions below. Number 1, what did the teacher intend to accomplish in the lesson at the beginning? Number 2, was it accomplished or achieved at the end? Has learning occurred? Number 3, what learning outcome was achieved? Number 4, during the activity, was there an opportunity for all students to learn? Describe. Number 5, how was the achieved learning outcome assessed? Explain. In self-reflect, as a future teacher, reflect on your observations and report in finding OBE in the classroom and complete the sentences. Choose only one to answer. Number 1, I like OBE because in the future, when I become a teacher, I should. Number 2, I do not seem to like OBE because in the future, when I become a teacher, I should. And that is the end of my report. Thank you for listening. Keep safe and God bless.